So a hobby doesn't become a business until it starts making money, and how it makes money is called the business model. So if you're struggling as an artist, your music, your dance, your theater, your writing, and you're not clear about how that is making you money, that may be one of the blocks that you might need to consider. So Investopedia has this definition of a business model. A business model is a strategic plan of how a company will make money. The model describes the way a business will take its product, offer it to the market, and drive sales. A business model determines what products make sense for a company to sell, how it wants to promote its products, what type of people it should try to cater to, and what revenue streams it may expect. If you're not clear on these, I suggest you get started with those. And here are 13 different business models that you could use as a creative. Number one, manufacturer. So manufacturer is the person who puts the products together from the raw materials. So they're the ones that package it. They're the ones that put it into something that is sellable, that you can put on a shelf if you're in a traditional brick and mortar business. And in this case, it's your show, it's your class, or whatever it might be, your painting, your music, that you are the manufacturer putting those things together, right? You are the artist. Number two is the distribution. So the distribution is, as it suggests, it's who's in charge of getting it out there, okay? So this one is like your label, your agencies, those kind of things. They will have a portfolio of artists or products or services, as you might want to call them. They have a portfolio of artists and their products, who they will then promote to the next one, which is number three, which is the retailer. So you might be familiar with retailers from your high street, the shops which have the products in their windows, for example. In the same way, if you have a theater or a gallery or a festival, those are places where a customer can go to see a range of artists, products, services, whatever you want to call them, right? So this is a space which is holding value from other people, that the distributors would have connected with them to get there, and they would have taken it from the manufacturers. Who are you? Number four is fee for service. So these are when you start thinking about your consulting, your teaching and things like that. It's a service you give to a client, and they pay you for that. And so they usually have a set fee for a specific service, and they can scale by increasing the amount of units that are sold or how many units you provide. Okay, so number five is a subscription service. So that means that someone is going to pay you a regular fee monthly to have access to all of your services or your products or whatever that might be. And you see this a lot nowadays. There's a lot of people who are creating apps for their classes. There's things like Passion.io or Kajabi or Samcart, which allow you to build a platform for your courses, and people can come in, they'll pay monthly and have access to everything. It's like Netflix, for example. It's a subscription. And it's something to consider if you do a lot of work regularly. It will allow people to have access to you all the time. Next one, number six, is bundles. So bundles is where you have more than one product or services that are grouped together. And the idea is that if you pay for the bundle, it'll be cheaper than what you would pay for the individual items, right? So in this case, for example, it might be, okay, we're gonna do a course for 6 months, and each of those months are gonna be made up of modules. Each of those you can buy individually, but together it will be a lot cheaper. Or there's 10 classes for the price of, that's a discount. 10 classes for the price of this much, which would be slightly cheaper if you do it as a course instead of a drop-in. It might also be if I do a retreat, for example, or if I do a show and you also get a t-shirt or like a goodie bag or something like that. Things you can buy separately. And a course plus your coaching, for example, might be an option. And you can do it upsell or downsell. So for example, if you have a big ticket offer and a small thing on the side, for example, the festival plus a t-shirt, or it might be something like you have a small thing, but then you have a big thing as well. Okay, the next one, number 7, is product as service. We talked about service as fee for service. This is product as service. So if you have something physical that people can effectively rent over time, and it might be an hourly rate, day rate, whatever that might be. So for example, if I'm a dancer and I have a set or costume or photography or video cameras or something like that, I can rent those things out individually. And so they'll pay for that while they have it and then get it back. The good thing about that is I would effectively spend the most to buy it for good. And let's say, for example, a camera is a couple of grand. That person, instead of paying a couple of grand to use to get one of their own, they decide they only want it for a weekend. So they might pay a couple hundred for 2 days in a row, which means that they don't have to pay the bigger fee to be able to have that same thing. The next one is leasing, and I think as artists, we really need to be deep in this. It's something that I think we're missing on the trip on. So the lease is effectively if, for example, a company buys something and then they lease it to another company, right? And in this case, whether you're buying it or creating it yourself, you have the opportunity to sell it to someone else for a particular period of time. It's like having a contract. In that contract, you give them the rights to use this product or service that you're giving. So for example, and it's not necessarily, it's not renting because it's over a relatively longer period of time. It might be a year, for example. So if I develop a show, let's say, for example, I've got a 45-minute show and I'm going to lease it to a festival. I'm going to lease it to a theater. I'm going to lease it to this touring company. And they will effectively buy the rights to my show for a year, for example. And that might mean that they put it on. They can put it on with their own characters, their own dancers, whatever it might be, but they're allowed to use the name, right? And they'll do it that way. The next one up, number 9, is franchise, and it's like a step up from leasing. Franchising means they actually invest in developing their own version of my product, right? So the most obvious franchises are things like McDonald's or Zumba, for example. You keep the brand name and you take the blueprint and you put it on, you basically create a new one in your local area, for example. So let's say there is a style of, there's a company of a painting company, and I decide that me in Sierra Leone, for example, we could do with this. So I'm going to get in touch with the company. I'm going to say, I'd like to franchise your company. They're going to give you the blueprint of how to do that in terms of the billing, in terms of the packages and services, in terms of the branding or the assets. And I'll be able to take that and go step by step to create that business from scratch somewhere else. And what's going to happen is I will pay them according to the profits. And that's how that franchising works. This is really good to know, especially leasing and franchising, because us as artists, we often create something and then just sell it. And leasing and franchising means you still keep part of that ownership. And then with leasing, you'll be able to get it back after the year, or at least you know that there's going to be an annual renewal if they want to keep that rights to that product. And franchising means you'll be able to retain a percentage of that profit every year, and it's a residual income at the end of the day. Number 10 is freemium, the idea of having something that is free and then you have a paywall for something that is more expensive. We mentioned things like courses before when we were talking about subscriptions. For example, you might have something that is a let's say, for example, a free goodie bag or a free song on Spotify, or let's say there's an event which you do and it's completely free. People come to that event, but then afterwards there is something that they'll pay for. And a good example of this is if there's a class, for example, you go to a class, and that might be a free class, a trial period. And then after the trial, people have to pay to continue to have access to this service. And that is something, again, as artists, we need to start thinking about. Number 11 is advertising. This is when you're selling an audience. And a good example of this is influencers. Whether you have music, whether you're an artist, whether you're a dancer, whatever that is, if you've got 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 followers, for example, you're effectively guaranteeing eyes for a particular person's brand, right? So this is how influencers work. I have 1 million followers. So if I was to post something wearing your chain, for example, or your beads, then people, 100 million people will be able to see these beads, and I will be able to direct them towards you, and they will get more revenue than they would have if I wasn't wearing them. That's how influencing works. And they are effectively selling audience attention. And so the advertisers pay for space on a platform with rates determined by the size of the audience. So if I have 10,000 followers, it's going to be a different rate for me to promote your products than if I had 1 million, for example. That's what that means. Number 12 is affiliates. And affiliates is actually quite an interesting one, which I think is another one which people could really maximize on. And it's really important if affiliate is related to what you do. So for example, if I am a dancer, an affiliate company that I might want to approach is someone who does trainers, or someone who does the particular type of clothing that we do, or someone who does education around, or classes around the kind of movement or song or whatever that is done as part of my show. And the way affiliates work is that I will have a relationship with them where if I send them clients, I get a percentage of whatever they pay. So because of that, and they're usually done by percentage wise. So let's say, for example, it was 5-10% of whatever the purchase is, it will come back to me. And so the reason why I'm pointing this out is if you're going to do an affiliate relationship for something like a book, you would have to sell a lot of books, send them a lot of people who are buying those books to be able to get anything that's really noticeable. It's more likely that if you were to become an affiliate for someone who does retreats, for example, and each of the retreat is like 5-10 grand, and then you'll be able to have 10% of that, then that's like £500. That is much more lucrative. So when you're looking at affiliates, try and find companies and services which are related to what you do, and have products and services which are scaled enough for them to be worth your while if you were to send a client their way and receive only a fraction of what they actually paying. And those are the 13 is razor blades, right? I know the name is a bit matting. I don't know why they call it that either. But the idea is that if you go to a store, for example, they'll buy your razor is the main product, but you have to sell the razor blades repeatedly over time, right? People are always going to need them, they'll break. So the idea is that you're selling the accessory that people would need, and instead of them having to buy the whole thing over and over again. So I'm trying to think of an example for this. Let's say expensive extras you will always need to buy. So for example, a really good way of having this is a lot of people who have a franchise, for example, for a dance company, a razor blade will be, for example, the clothing, the t-shirts or the uniform that the children or whatever have to wear. They're always going to need to buy that. So that will effectively be your business model like that. One of the things to notice about business models is you don't have to have one. What's likely to happen is, depending on your products and services, you might have a combination of some of these, right? So I'm going to go back over these, and these are 13 business models for creatives. Number 1 is manufacturing. Number 2 is distribution. Number 3 is retailer. Number 4 is fee for service. Number 5 is subscription. Number 6 is bundling. Number 7 is product for service. Number 8 is leasing. Number 9 is franchise. Number 10 is freemium. Number 11 is advertising. Number 12 is affiliate. And number 13 are razor blades. One of the things that I failed to mention on here is that really number 0 is the raw materials, and that's you. And the reason why I'm pointing this out at the very beginning is that the raw materials by themselves are not a business model. And it's really important to notice that even if you are gold, if you're not putting yourself into a business model where cash can flow through it, then it just won't happen by itself. And a lot of us struggle because we don't know how to create a vehicle around our raw materials in a way to make money. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. If you have anyone who thinks this will be, where you think this will be useful to them, make sure you share it to them. And what business models do you use? Put it in the comments and follow.